This story is titled, Mom Asked Me to Cancel My Wedding Because Golden Sister Would Be Hurt, so I uninvited them. Hi everyone! Before we dive in, a quick favor. If you enjoy content like this, please hit the subscribe button. It's free, supports the channel, and makes sure you never miss out on amazing videos. Alright, let's get started. Hi Reddit! You'd think announcing your engagement would be one of the happiest moments of your life, right? Yeah, me too. Turns out, for me, it was just the starting gun for a whole mess of drama I never signed up for. I'm Emily, 30F, and my fiancé Ryan, 31M, proposed to me last March. We've been together for 6 years. He's my best friend, my partner, and genuinely the most supportive person I know. When he got down on one knee, it felt like everything had fallen into place. But as soon as I shared the news, my mom and half-sister Cassie, 24F, decided to make my engagement and wedding their personal battleground. A little backstory here. My mom married my stepdad Tom when I was 5. Cassie is their daughter, and while we grew up together, we've always been more like acquaintances who tolerate each other than actual sisters. The thing is, Cassie has always had this weird competitive streak when it comes to me. It started when we were kids. She'd throw a fit if I got a better grade or if one of my relatives complimented me. As we got older, the stakes just got higher. I went to college on a scholarship, while Cassie didn't go at all. I've been with Ryan for years, while she's bounced from one messy relationship to another. And now that I'm engaged, she's acting like my happiness is some personal vendetta against her. Anyway, Ryan proposed last March during a quiet weekend at home, and we decided on a January wedding. We wanted something small and intimate, a cozy ceremony with about 70 guests. It felt perfect for us. I was so excited to start planning, and I thought my family would be too. Boy, was I wrong. When I called my mom to tell her the news, her first response wasn't excitement. It was, "Oh, Cassie's not going to like this." I kind of laughed it off, thinking she was joking. But she wasn't. Apparently, my engagement was going to hurt Cassie's feelings. Why? Because she was single and trying to figure things out. I brushed it aside at first, thinking it was just a weird comment. But then, a few weeks later, Cassie announced she was getting married. To a guy she'd been dating for 3 months. Now, I try not to judge other people's choices, but this felt off. Cassie has always been impulsive, but getting married after 3 months? To a guy none of us really knew? It didn't sit right with me, but I kept my mouth shut. I figured it was her life, her decision, and not my business. Fast forward to July. Cassie's whirlwind marriage blew up as fast as it started. Her husband, Jake, cheated on her, with her best friend no less. 2 months after their wedding, she filed for divorce. The whole situation was messy and heartbreaking, and I genuinely felt bad for her. I tried to be supportive, but every time I reached out, I got the cold shoulder. It felt like she was angry at me, but I couldn't figure out why. Then it hit me. She didn't want my support. She wanted to blame me. From what I've pieced together, Cassie thinks I somehow triggered her rushed marriage. Like my engagement announcement was some kind of challenge she needed to win. And when her marriage fell apart, I guess she decided it was easier to resent me than to take responsibility for her own decisions. By the time fall rolled around, things were tense. Cassie and I hadn't really spoken since her divorce, and Mom was acting weird. Every time I brought up wedding planning, she'd get quiet or change the subject. It felt like she was avoiding the topic, but I didn't push it. I figured she just didn't want to talk about weddings because of Cassie's situation. I should have seen the signs. Let me tell you, nothing prepares you for the sheer absurdity of being guilt-tripped about your own wedding. I thought planning a wedding would be stressful because of logistics or budgets, not because my own family would turn it into some twisted competition. But here we are. So, it's mid-November, and Ryan and I just sent out our wedding invitations. I was super excited, finally feeling like everything was coming together. That excitement didn't last long because 2 days later, I got the call. It was my mom. I remember thinking it was a bit strange because she rarely calls me. She's more of a text once a month kind of person. But I answered, figuring she might want to chat about the wedding. I should have known better. The conversation started innocently enough. She asked how I was doing, how Ryan was, and then casually slipped in, "So, you're really going through with the wedding?" At first, I thought she was just confirming the date or something. Yeah, of course, everything's set. We've booked the venue, caterer, flowers. Most of it's paid for. That's when she sighed. Not a normal sigh. A loud, exaggerated, dramatic sigh that practically screamed, "You're about to ruin someone's life." "Well," she said, dragging out the word like she was about to drop some life-changing wisdom. "I've been thinking about Cassie, and I really think you should reconsider." I paused, genuinely confused. Reconsider what? She hesitated, like she was gearing up for a speech. I just don't think it's a good time for a wedding, Emily. Cassie's still so heartbroken from the divorce. Having a big celebration like this, so soon after everything she's been through, it feels a little insensitive. I honestly thought I misheard her. Wait, you think I should cancel my wedding? For Cassie? Well, yes, she said, like it was the most reasonable request in the world. She's been through so much, and seeing you get married so soon after her divorce, it's going to hurt her. A lot. I was stunned. I didn't even know how to respond. Mom, we've been planning this wedding for almost a year. The venue's booked, the deposits are paid. How can you ask me to just cancel it? She didn't miss a beat. You could always do something small. A church ceremony, maybe, with just immediate family. That way, you still get married, but it's not such a big production. You wouldn't be flaunting it. Flaunting it? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Mom, this isn't about flaunting anything. It's about celebrating my relationship with Ryan. We've been together for 6 years. This is our day. She sighed again, heavier this time. I just think if you really loved your sister, you'd do this for her. She needs time to heal, and a big wedding is going to make things worse for her. At this point, I was furious, but I tried to stay calm. Mom, I get that Cassie's going through a rough time, but this has nothing to do with her. Ryan and I have been planning this for so long. It's not fair to ask us to change everything because of her choices. She didn't like that. Her choices? Emily, she didn't choose to have her husband cheat on her. She didn't choose to have her life fall apart. Yeah, but she did choose to marry a guy she barely knew after 3 months. That was the wrong thing to say. Mom completely lost it, accusing me of being cruel and selfish, of not understanding what Cassie's been through. She even threw in a classic, I thought I raised you better than this. At that point, I couldn't deal anymore. Mom, I'm not canceling my wedding. End of discussion. I hung up, shaking with anger. I immediately called Ryan and told him everything. He was just as baffled as I was. Who asks their own daughter to cancel her wedding for someone else's divorce? He said. I wish I could say that was the end of it, but of course, it wasn't. Over the next few weeks, Mom doubled down on her campaign to guilt me into canceling or scaling down the wedding. She'd call me every few days, always with some variation of the same argument. Cassie's heartbroken. You're being insensitive. A small wedding would mean so much to the family. At one point, she even tried to rope Ryan into it. She called him directly, saying, You're such a thoughtful person, Ryan. I know you'll understand why this is important for Cassie. Luckily, he shut that down immediately, telling her we were sticking with our original plans. But then Cassie got involved. She started texting me, making passive-aggressive comments like, Must be nice to have everything go perfectly for you. And, Don't you think it's a little soon for a big celebration? She even brought up the date, saying, January feels like such a weird time for a wedding. Are you sure you didn't pick it to rub it in my face? Rub it in her face? I couldn't believe the audacity. I tried ignoring her at first, but she just kept escalating. She started calling me, leaving these long, guilt-trippy voicemails about how hard it was for her to even think about weddings, and how my insensitivity was making her healing process so much harder. The worst part was how my mom and Cassie seemed to feed off each other. Mom would call and say something like, Cassie was crying all night thinking about your wedding. And then Cassie would text me the next day saying, Mom's so upset about how you're handling this. It was exhausting. I was at my breaking point. I couldn't believe how far they were willing to go to make my wedding about them. I knew I had to draw a line, but I wasn't sure how yet. This was the moment I realized just how toxic their behavior was. This wasn't about Cassie's divorce or her feelings. It was about control. They wanted me to put my life on hold to cater to their insecurities, and I was done letting them dictate my happiness. By December, things had officially spiraled out of control. Cassie was no longer content to sulk in private or throw passive-aggressive texts my way. She was now on a mission to drag my name through the mud with anyone who'd listen. And honestly, I was getting whiplash trying to keep up with all her stunts. It started small. I heard from my cousin Megan, bless her for being the family informant, that Cassie had been calling up relatives to warn them about me. According to her, I was flaunting my wedding in her face to humiliate her. She even claimed I had deliberately chosen January, knowing it would be too soon after her divorce for her to emotionally handle it. I couldn't wrap my head around the logic. My engagement had been set months before she even got married, let alone divorced. How on earth was I supposed to predict her life would fall apart when I was sending out save the dates? But logic doesn't seem to matter much when someone's determined to play the victim. Her stories got more dramatic with each retelling. Megan told me Cassie was saying things like, Emily always thinks she's better than me. She's just rubbing her perfect little life in my face because she knows I'm struggling. The worst part? Some family members actually bought into her narrative. My mom, of course, was her biggest cheerleader. She started calling me almost daily to ask if I had reconsidered canceling or scaling back the wedding. Cassie's still so fragile, she'd say. She cried all night after seeing your wedding invitations. You really don't need a big event. Can't you just do something simple? I stood firm every single time, but it was exhausting. The real breaking point came at a family gathering on Christmas. Ryan and I had been invited to a dinner at my aunt's house, and I thought it would be a nice way to decompress after all the wedding stress. Of course, Cassie and Mom were there too, which should have been my first red flag. Things were tense from the start. Cassie barely acknowledged me, but every time I mentioned the wedding, she'd huff or roll her eyes. At one point, I was chatting with my aunt about flowers, and Cassie loudly muttered, "Must be nice to waste so much money on a party when some people can barely pick up the pieces of their lives." I ignored her, but it was obvious she wanted a reaction. Eventually, the conversation shifted, and I started to relax a bit. That is, until Cassie suddenly burst into tears in the middle of the living room. She was full on sobbing, shaking her head, and muttering, "I can't believe how cruel people can be." Everyone froze. My aunt rushed over to comfort her, asking what was wrong. That's when Cassie launched into her performance. "It's just so hard," she said through her tears. "I've been through so much this year, and now I have to sit here and listen to Emily talk about her perfect wedding like nothing else matters. She knows how much pain I'm in, but she doesn't care." My mom chimed in immediately, rubbing Cassie's back like she was the victim of some terrible injustice. "She's right, Emily. You need to be more considerate. You have no idea how hard this has been for her." That's when I lost it. I had been holding my tongue for weeks, but I couldn't take it anymore. "This wedding has nothing to do with Cassie," I said, trying to stay calm. "Ryan and I have been planning this for a year. If she's upset, that's not my fault. Maybe she should take some responsibility for rushing into a bad marriage instead of blaming me for her problems." The room went dead silent. My aunt looked like she wanted to disappear into the couch, and Cassie's tears immediately turned to rage. "How dare you?" she snapped. "You don't know what it's like to have your life fall apart. You've had everything handed to you, your scholarship, your boyfriend, your perfect little life. You've never had to struggle for anything." I stood up, shaking with anger. "You're right, Cassie. I don't know what it's like to have my life fall apart. But that's because I don't make impulsive decisions just to compete with other people. Maybe if you spent less time being bitter and more time working on yourself, you wouldn't be in this situation." At that point, Ryan grabbed my hand and said, "We're leaving." I didn't argue. On the drive home, I kept replaying the conversation in my head, second-guessing whether I'd been too harsh. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized I had every right to stand up for myself. Cassie had been pushing me for weeks, and I was done letting her turn my wedding into her pity party. What really stuck with me, though, was how Mom had jumped to Cassie's defense without hesitation. Not once did she try to understand my side, or even acknowledge how much stress this whole situation was causing me. It felt like she had chosen her favorite, and it wasn't me. The next day, I got a text from Mom. "You owe your sister an apology for what you said last night. She's been through so much, and you were unnecessarily cruel." I didn't reply. I was done apologizing for things that weren't my fault. By this point, it's clear that Cassie isn't going to back down, and Mom isn't going to stop enabling her. I don't know what their next move will be, but I know I have to start preparing for the worst. I'll update you soon if anything comes up. Update 1. Hey again. Thank you so much for your comments and support on my last post. Your advice really helped me. So, after the disaster at the family dinner, I knew I had to draw a hard line. Cassie and my mom weren't just being unreasonable. They were actively trying to sabotage my happiness. Ignoring it clearly wasn't working, and every attempt to defend myself just seemed to fuel their drama. I realized the only way to move forward was to completely shut them out of the wedding. That decision wasn't easy, but it was necessary. 2 days after the dinner, I sat down with Ryan and laid everything out. "I think I need to uninvite them," I said, feeling a lump in my throat. "They're just going to make things worse if they're there." Ryan nodded immediately. "I've been thinking the same thing. It sucks, but this is your day, our day, and you deserve to enjoy it without worrying about their next move." Hearing his support made me feel a little better, but the thought of actually cutting off my mom and sister from my wedding was daunting. It wasn't just about them. It was about the ripple effect it might have on the rest of the family. Still, I knew I couldn't let their toxic behavior overshadow everything Ryan and I had worked so hard to plan. So, I drafted an email. I kept it short and factual. I explained that their actions over the past few months, spreading rumors, guilt-tripping me and creating unnecessary drama, had made it clear they weren't supportive of my wedding. I told them that their behavior had caused me significant stress, and for my own peace of mind, I had decided to uninvite them. I hit send and immediately felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. Within hours, the responses started rolling in. Mom was the first to reply, and let me tell you, it was a doozy. She called me cold-hearted and accused me of tearing the family apart. Her email was filled with dramatic phrases like, I never thought my own daughter would betray me like this, and you've chosen a man over your own blood. She even threw in a line about how my dad would be disappointed in me if he were still alive. Classic guilt trip tactics. I didn't reply. Next came Cassie. Her response was exactly what I expected, full of anger and self-pity. She accused me of being jealous of her, still not sure what I'm supposed to be jealous of, and claimed I was punishing her for being honest about her feelings. She ended her email with, "You'll regret this when you realize you've destroyed this family." I didn't reply to her either. The fallout didn't stop there. Over the next few days, I started getting calls and texts from other family members, mostly the ones Mom and Cassie had already poisoned against me. My uncle called to tell me I was being immature and should just let it go for the sake of family harmony. A cousin I barely speak to left a voicemail saying, I can't believe you do something like this to your own mother. At first, I felt overwhelmed by the backlash. But then, something amazing happened. The people who actually mattered started showing up for me. My dad's sister, Aunt Laura, called me to say she was proud of me for standing up for myself. You've put up with their nonsense for long enough, she said. It's about time you put your foot down. And my cousin Megan, who had been keeping me updated on Cassie's antics, sent me a long text saying, don't let them get to you. Everyone who really knows you is on your side. Even my godmother, who's one of the most no-nonsense people I know, called to tell me I was doing the right thing. Your wedding should be about love and celebration, not drama and bitterness, she said. Their support was like a balm for my soul. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I wasn't alone in this fight. But of course, Mom and Cassie weren't going to let it go quietly. About a week after I sent the email, I got another call from Megan. You're not going to believe this, she said, sounding both amused and annoyed. Cassie's telling people you uninvited her because you're threatened by her. I couldn't help but laugh. Threatened by what, exactly? Apparently, she's been saying you're worried Ryan has feelings for her, Megan said. She claims he's been flirting with her and you found out, so you're trying to get rid of her to save face. It was so ridiculous. I didn't even know how to respond. We both knew there was zero truth to anything she was saying. Still, it was infuriating that she was trying to drag him into her web of lies. That's just desperate, I said. No one's going to believe that. Honestly, most people don't, Megan said. But you know how she is. She's going to keep spinning the story until she finds someone gullible enough to take her side. I decided not to waste any more energy worrying about Cassie's delusions. At this point, I was focused on protecting my peace and making sure my wedding day went off without a hitch. To that end, Ryan and I sat down to go over the guest list and finalize all the details. We reached out to the venue to make sure they had our backs in case Cassie or Mom tried to pull anything. We also hired a couple of security guards to keep things under control, something I never thought I'd have to do for my own wedding, but here we were. Through it all, Ryan was my rock. He reminded me that this was our day and that we didn't owe anyone an explanation for protecting our happiness. By the time New Year's rolled around, I felt like I was finally regaining control. Cassie and Mom could spin their narratives all they wanted, but they weren't going to ruin this for me. Thanks for sticking around until here. I'll update you soon. Update 2. I know it hasn't been long since my last update, but what happened is something I absolutely needed to tell you about immediately. If you thought Cassie's antics couldn't get any worse, buckle up, because this one takes the cake. By the time January rolled around, I thought I'd seen every shade of her jealousy, pettiness, and downright manipulative behavior. But what she tried to pull next left me absolutely floored, and honestly, a little disgusted. It all started with a weird text Ryan got one evening. We were sitting on the couch, finally relaxing after a stressful day of finalizing wedding details, when his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and I noticed his face immediately go from relaxed to tense. What is it? I asked, already bracing myself for drama. It's Cassie, he said, showing me the message. The text read, Hey Ryan, I really need someone to talk to. I know you probably think I'm a terrible person right now, but I'm really struggling, and I feel like you're the only one who understands. Can we meet up? At first, I didn't know how to react. I mean, on the surface, it seemed innocent enough, but knowing Cassie, and knowing how hard she'd been working to cause problems, I had a bad feeling. Ryan must have sensed it too because he didn't reply right away. Instead, he turned to me and said, I don't like this. It feels off. Because it is off, I said. She's never even liked you. Why would she suddenly want to talk to you about her feelings? We agreed it was best to ignore her, but the messages kept coming. Over the next few days, she sent Ryan a string of increasingly desperate texts. She talked about how lonely she felt, how she had no one else to turn to, and how much she appreciated his kindness during such a difficult time. Let me remind you, Ryan had never had any kind of meaningful conversation with Cassie. He'd always been polite to her, of course, but they weren't close by any stretch of the imagination. So this sudden outpouring of gratitude felt calculated. Ryan was as creeped out as I was, but we both decided it was better to wait and see what her endgame was before responding. And sure enough, it didn't take long for her true intentions to come to light. Later, Ryan got another message, and this one was so blatant it made my blood boil. Cassie wrote, I've been thinking a lot about you lately. I know it's wrong, but I can't help it. I feel like we have a connection that Emily doesn't understand. I don't know what to do with these feelings. I was furious, not just at her for being so brazen, but also at the sheer disrespect of it all. She knew we were getting married in a matter of days, and here she was, trying to wedge herself between us with some cheap tricks. Ryan, bless him, immediately showed me the message and asked, How do you want to handle this? I took a deep breath and said, Let's not give her the satisfaction of a direct response. Block her number, but before you do, take screenshots of everything. He did exactly that, and we kept the screenshots as receipts, just in case she decided to try spinning some wild narrative later. The next morning, I decided I wasn't going to let this slide. I didn't respond to her directly. There was no point in engaging with someone so desperate for attention. But I did send an email to my mom and a few other close family members, laying out what had happened. I kept it straightforward, attaching the screenshots and explaining that this was the proof that I was right to uninvite Cassie from the wedding. This behavior is toxic and manipulative, I wrote. I've done everything I can to keep the peace, but this crosses a line, and I hope now you understand why I excluded her before. The responses were mixed. My mom, predictably, came to Cassie's defense. She claimed I must have misunderstood her intentions, and that I was blowing things out of proportion. She even had the nerve to suggest that Ryan might have misread the messages. I can't believe you'd accuse your own sister of something so horrible, Mom wrote. Cassie's just going through a tough time, and you're making it all about you. I rolled my eyes so hard I almost sprained something. At this point, I wasn't even surprised. But other family members were much more supportive. Megan, my cousin who'd been in my corner from the start, called me immediately after reading the email. Are you serious? She said. I knew Cassie was a piece of work, but this is next level. Good for you for cutting her off. My dad's sister, Aunt Laura, was just as outraged. You're absolutely right to keep her out of the wedding, she said. She's proven time and again that she doesn't respect you, and this just confirms it. Their support meant the world to me, but I'd be lying if I said it completely erased the hurt. Cassie's stunt wasn't just disrespectful, it was humiliating. It felt like she was trying to undermine everything Ryan and I had built together, and I couldn't understand why. Was it jealousy? Spite? Some twisted need for attention? Maybe all of the above. Whatever her reasons, I knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going to win. With just a few days left until the wedding, I made a promise to myself that I wouldn't let Cassie or Mom ruin this for me. I also made sure to double down on security measures for the big day. I reached out to the venue and gave them a heads up about the situation, letting them know Cassie and Mom were explicitly uninvited. I even hired an extra security guard, just in case they decided to show up anyway. It felt a little extreme, but after everything they'd pulled, I wasn't taking any chances. I now feel more prepared than ever to face whatever nonsense they might try to throw my way. Cassie's dirty tricks might have shaken me, but they didn't break me. If anything, they only made me more determined to stand my ground and protect my peace. Thanks again for all your support through all this. I'll update you soon. Update 3. Hey again. Let's hope it's the last time you hear about my family drama. Let me tell you, I thought I had prepared myself for every possible scenario leading up to my wedding. But nothing quite prepares you for the moment when your own family tries to sabotage the happiest day of your life. The morning of the wedding started off beautifully. The venue looked magical with all the flowers and decorations we'd picked out over the past year. The weather was perfect for our ceremony, and my bridesmaids kept me laughing and relaxed while we got ready. Ryan and I had agreed to do a first look before the ceremony, so once I was dressed, I stepped outside to meet him in the garden. The second I saw him standing there, looking every bit as nervous and excited as I felt, all the stress and drama melted away. This was the moment I'd been waiting for, and nothing else mattered. Or so I thought. About 30 minutes before the ceremony was set to begin, I was back in the bridal suite doing some last-minute touch-ups when my maid of honor, Amanda, came rushing in. She looked flustered, which immediately set off alarm bells. "You're not going to believe this," she said. "Cassie and your mom are here." My stomach dropped. "What? How? I thought security was handling it." "They're trying to get in," Amanda said. "Security stopped them at the gate, but they're causing a huge scene." "Of course they were." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "What are they saying?" Amanda hesitated, which told me it wasn't good. "Your mom's crying and saying she just wants to see her daughter get married. Cassie's, well, she's screaming about how you're a horrible person and how you don't deserve this day." I felt my blood start to boil. It wasn't enough for them to make the months leading up to the wedding a nightmare. They had to try to ruin the actual day too. "What do you want me to do?" Amanda asked. "Nothing," I said firmly. "Let security handle it. If we go out there, it's just going to give them what they want." Amanda nodded and left to check in with the guards. Meanwhile, I sat down and tried to collect myself. I could hear my mom and Cassie faintly in the distance, shouting and arguing with security, and it took everything in me not to march out there and give them a piece of my mind. A few minutes later, Amanda came back with an update. "They're refusing to leave. The venue manager offered to call the police, but they're worried it'll cause an even bigger scene." I groaned. This was exactly why I'd uninvited them in the first place. "Do you want me to tell Ryan?" Amanda asked. I shook my head. "No, he doesn't need this stress right now. Just make sure they don't get anywhere near the ceremony." Thankfully, security was on top of it. They managed to keep my mom and Cassie contained to the parking lot, and eventually, the venue staff called a ride service to take them away. But not before Cassie shouted loud enough for everyone in the vicinity to hear, "You'll regret this, Emily. You'll regret cutting out your own family." Once they were gone, I took another deep breath and told myself to let it go. They were out of sight now, and I wasn't going to let them steal my joy. The ceremony itself was everything I'd dreamed of and more. Standing up there with Ryan, surrounded by our closest friends and family, the supportive ones at least, I felt an overwhelming sense of love and gratitude. This was what mattered. Not the drama, not the bitterness, just this moment with the people who truly cared about us. After the ceremony, during the cocktail hour, I started hearing bits and pieces about what had gone down with my mom and Cassie. Apparently, they'd been shouting accusations at the security guards, saying I was brainwashed by Ryan, and that the family would never forgive me for excluding them. A few guests even overheard them from the parking lot, which was embarrassing, but most people just rolled their eyes and brushed it off. My dad's sister, Aunt Laura, came up to me during dinner and said, "I'm so proud of you for standing your ground. They showed their true colors today, and everyone sees it now." That was a common sentiment throughout the night. Cousins, friends, even some of my mom's old friends pulled me aside to tell me they were on my side. It felt like a collective reckoning. People finally realized how toxic my mom and Cassie had been, and they weren't having it. The rest of the evening was a blur of laughter, dancing, and pure joy. Ryan and I shared our first dance under twinkling lights. My maid of honor gave a hilarious and heartfelt toast, and my dad's best friend, who's practically an uncle to me, brought the house down with a story about how he once caught Ryan trying to sneak out of a family barbecue with a plate of ribs. By the time the night ended, I felt lighter than I had in months. Cassie and my mom hadn't won. Their attempts to ruin the day had only highlighted how much love and support Ryan and I had from the people who actually mattered. When I got back to the hotel that night, I checked my phone and saw I had a dozen missed calls and texts from my mom. I didn't bother reading them. I was done letting her or Cassie take up space in my life. Cutting them out completely was one of the hardest decisions I've ever had to make, but standing there with Ryan, surrounded by people who genuinely cared about us, I knew it was the right one. Thanks again for sharing your thoughts with me throughout this mess. I really do appreciate it. I'll let you know if there's an after-wedding drama. Let's hope not. I'm so done, LOL. Update 4. Hey Reddit, you won't believe what happened. About a week after the wedding, I got a call from my cousin Megan, who, as usual, was the first to deliver the family gossip. "You're not going to believe what just happened," she said, sounding way more excited than concerned. I sighed. "What now?" "Cassie and your mom had a huge fight," Megan said. "Like epic level fight. And get this, your mom kicked her out of the house." I almost dropped my phone. "Wait, what? What happened?" Megan was more than happy to fill me in. Apparently, after the wedding, Cassie had been sulking around my mom's house, stewing over the fact that her grand plan to ruin my day had failed. According to Megan, she was blaming everyone. Me, Ryan, the security guards, even some random cousin who apparently didn't try hard enough to stop me. The real explosion happened when she turned on my mom. Cassie accused her of not doing enough to stop the wedding. She started screaming about how it was mom's fault that I'd gone through with it, that mom should have been more forceful in convincing me to cancel. Mom, who has always coddled Cassie no matter how ridiculous she's been, finally hit her breaking point. Megan said mom yelled back, telling Cassie she was tired of the drama and that she was an adult who needed to take responsibility for her own life. Cassie didn't take that well. She apparently went on a full-blown rant, accusing mom of failing her as a parent and choosing me over her. It got so bad that mom finally told her to pack her things and leave. When Megan told me all this, I couldn't help but laugh, not because I thought it was funny, but because of the sheer irony of it. After months of mom defending Cassie and taking her side, it all came back to bite her. She really kicked her out? I asked, still trying to process it. Yep, Megan said. Cassie's staying with a friend for now, but I wouldn't be surprised if she comes crawling back in a few weeks. The whole situation felt like karma in action. In the end, their toxicity turned inward, and they ended up taking it out on each other. I wish I could say I felt bad for either of them, but honestly, I didn't. After everything they put me through, it felt like poetic justice. As for me, I'm done with both of them. I've blocked their numbers, muted them on social media, and made it clear to the rest of the family that I'm not interested in hearing about their latest antics. Ryan and I are focusing on starting this new chapter of our lives together, and I couldn't be happier. Thanks for reading, and to everyone who supported me throughout this madness. Whether it was a kind comment or a message of encouragement, thank you. You helped me stay strong when it mattered most.